Ready, player church. Welcome to the But I Don't Know podcast, the podcast where we explore the concept that maybe everybody you know is wrong, including myself. My name is John.
And I'm yep.
And you might notice we've got a special guest on our episode today. We're really excited. His name is Gerrie Steenkamp, and he is the pastor of the church we both attend, Deo Victoria Church. Welcome, Gerrie. Say how's it to the people that are listening.
Thank you, John. Thank you, JP. And hello to everybody out there. Yeah, it's great to be with you guys. Thanks for the invitation.
Lekker, man. Thank you for accepting the invitation and being here.
I still not sure what I'm accepting because your podcast is very interesting just to know that you don't know. So I guess I don't know either right now. So
yeah, no, it's cool.
That's perfect, actually.
That is perfect, yeah. So, as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, we're a little bit cramped up into one little camera angle over here, but this is a small space we're recording in with limited equipment, but we're going to do the best we can do. What's most important is that you can hear us. Testing 1 2, testing 1 2. I think that sounds all right.
I don't know, I can't.
I know you can't. But anyways, for those of you who are listening on on podcasting apps and stuff, I want to remind you about our website, which is www.dunocast.co.za. That's www.dunocast.co.za. On that website, you'll find all our podcast episodes. You'll find some blogs from 3 years ago. And very soon, you'll be finding a merch store. It's not live yet, but hopefully within the next week it will go live. And we've got one product lined up at the moment where we're going to be selling one t-shirt, which is going to have that print on it. If you're on YouTube, you'll see that at the moment. If you're on podcast, you can't see it. But it says the following. It says, love people, hate sin. And we are actually probably going to do an episode on that t-shirt, I'm thinking, JP. I thought maybe our next episode can actually be about the t-shirt idea. The concept of it.
Are you asking?
I'm telling you
that
cool. That's what's going to happen. I'm kidding. But anyway, keep a look on our website. That'll come up sometime soon, and we're pretty excited about it. But for now, follow us on our social networks and stuff. We're going to jump into today's episode, and today's episode is about virtual reality church. Some of you might have noticed on social media networks and stuff that some churches, which we're not going to mention in this podcast because our goal here is not to criticize churches or call people out in this episode. We want to just discuss the concept of virtual reality church. But some churches have started doing church in virtual reality. So like people are putting on their Oculus goggles or whatever. I don't know. I've never been in VR before, so I don't really know how it all works. But they put on their goggles and they go onto virtual reality service, and then they walk with this avatar, like this computer-generated avatar, into a physical building that isn't physical because it's actually just virtual. And then they watch a pastor on a screen in virtual reality and then like attend church in virtual reality.
The future is now.
The future is now, old man. I was talking to myself there. But, so that's what we're going to be talking about this week and discussing whether we think this is a good progression or a bad progression. Now, I'm going to open with, mention to you guys that I'm going to maybe throw something out there and I'm going to say something and then we can take it from there.
do. Yeah.
I'm going to suggest for a moment that whatever decision we make about VR church has to directly impact our opinions on a live stream church service. Because ultimately VR church is a more engaging version of a live stream. But that's just my sort of rough thought process as I've been thinking about this thing. It's so difficult to separate these two concepts. live stream church, which most churches are doing now thanks to COVID, versus a virtual reality church, which is just a more engaging version of a live stream. So that's how I'm going to open. But then, what's your guys' opinions? What do you guys think? Like, JP?
It's a confusing concept, the concept of virtual reality church, because ultimately what virtual reality is, it's a simulation. It simulates something. Like there was a game, like one of the first VR games that came out was like virtual reality work, or what like a job thing where you sit at a desk and you have to do like tasks, and it's like a job simulation. And I'm like, you can just go to your job and do that.
Yeah, I guess so.
But like that's the problem I've got is virtual reality is a simulation. And are we saying that we are simulating church? Can that be, and this is my ultimate question, I think the question that's going to kind of be the driving point of this conversation potentially is this a replacement for church? Like if we take your statement about live stream church, where you just have a camera and you live stream it on YouTube or wherever, is that a replacement for church? I think that's the question that we need to discuss, and that's the question that we need to answer. Like, is this a viable, legitimate replacement for church?
Yeah.
But I wonder, and I'm obviously a bit of a why guy, so just so that you guys know that I try and reinvent the wheel 1,000 times. You guys know it from our team meetings sometimes. My first question is actually, again, what is virtual reality? Because church, in essence, we're talking about the reality, but we're talking about virtual reality. And I'm actually thinking what you said, John, about that it will impact large stream, but I was even thinking further than that. Let's take church out for a moment and say, can we create virtual work?
Yeah.
Can we create virtual marriage? Can we create virtual relationships?
Sure.
So that's what I'm wondering. When is that going to come? You don't have best friends.
Yeah.
So there's a package. You can go to Incredible Connection, buy some virtual reality. You can choose the personality. You're an introvert. Do you want the extrovert?
Sure.
So I realized that the concept of virtual reality, when it comes to relationship, that's my question that makes it actually a bit bigger, because church in essence is relationship.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you guys think about, having relationships like that. If we just go to relationships.
It's super cool that you introduced that. I just want to clarify something. I realized we didn't give a lot of context as to
Please do.
even why Carrie's on the show and why we're talking about this with Carrie. But I think that's part of the value of having you in this conversation, and specifically having this conversation with you here, is that you literally pastor a church for a living. It's what you do.
Yes.
And you think church, you eat church, you sleep church. And that's what makes your opinion on this so valuable, is you think of church differently to the average viewer or listener of this podcast, because you think of those elements. You think of church as not just a building and pay the water and lights and stuff like that. It's more than that.
Yeah.
So that's what makes it so valuable. And I love the fact that you bring that up, because church is also relationships and people and stuff like that. So I think that's an interesting question. I don't know how far people are going to build their lives around virtual reality in the future, and whether that's going to be a good thing or not.
Well, Mark Zuckerberg is pushing this metaverse thing strong these days.
The Zuck is going for it. He thinks this is like absolutely
the future.
The next step of human evolution.
Yeah. But what will it? What will be the purpose of that? going into a virtual world and not a real world?
Yeah. Well, I guess eventually the natural progression of that question, and this is possibly what's going on in your brain, is if we completely consume ourselves into a virtual reality and we do it big enough and well enough for long enough, what's going to make that any different from this reality in the sense of there's still going to be people involved, you're still going to have to work, you're still going to have people you don't like within this virtual reality space, especially if your job depends on it. And that then has implications even right now with regards to going to virtual reality church. What makes it different going there than going to your local church? Because if you can go to the virtual reality church, then other people can go to it. And if other people can go to it, you're not escaping the people. If that's your goal. If your goal is, I don't like the people where, well, there's going to be people at the virtual reality church. Now, sure, they're digital, but they're people.
Yeah.
But is that a legitimate, again, is that a legitimate alternative for human connection? Like, do you still have that human connection in the virtual space?
Human connection is the one question that I have. The second one that I'm thinking about, just that's going through my head while we're sitting here and thinking is I think virtual church can be informational. It's a different way of getting information. Sure. But my concern, and even not with church, but even building relationships like that or something, is transformation.
Sure.
Virtual anything. Reality cannot do that, you know. Yeah. For instance, I love running, and I've considered running a Comrades many times, and I'm just thinking, you know, I don't have the time or the energy, or I'm not fit enough yet, and so on. But if they can create a virtual reality Comrades for me, where I actually get my medal sitting on my couch, you know,
that'd be great.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. But I'll get the information, but I won't get the transformation, and that's the thing that I'm will have to. I can imagine. I don't know where it will go, but they'll have to not just give me the goggles. They'll have to put a few of those. You remember those muscle training things?
Yeah,
they'll have to maybe put it there and say, we think by kilometer 35, when you're going uphill, this muscle is got to feel a little bit. You've got to stretch, you know. But that's the only way to maybe recreate it. But that's what I'm wondering, especially when it comes to reality, is change. How are we going to approach change, and what's going to be transformation? That's what I'm thinking. Sure. Because church, in a big way, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the transformation of lives. And there's one or two thoughts that I have about it that I think that virtual reality can help with. But I do think that's my question. Information is one thing, transformation is another thing.
Sure.
How do you do that?
That's super cool.
I just saw the image walking into the room and seeing Gerrie with one of those.
Yeah.
Doing this. Right?
I'm halfway down. And you can be my water table, you know, to bring me the water. And, you know, and we can be next to a coffee machine if we want to, you know.
Yeah. But I think that's cool, the concept of transformation, because ultimately that's the value of church, is transformation in the individual, transformation in the community, transformation in the nation, really. I mean, that we somewhat pride ourselves in the fact that churches have a voice in the nation.
Yeah.
And that's transformative. That's somewhat the goal. And
yes.
And I think that was Jesus's heart behind church, is that lives would be transformed. At the end of the day, that was what the sacrifice on the cross was about.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of gave his life for this goal of transforming lives. The Bible says that the old things have passed away and everything has become new.
Yes.
Become new. And there's this transformation aspect. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I think that was the heart of Christ and the heart of God when he began the church, when he initiated the church that day. And then we have to ask ourselves as the church, our responsibility is to continue that heart. And is a live stream and a virtual reality church assisting us in continuing that heart and continuing that legacy? And is it worth pursuing? Is it contributing enough to warrant pursuing that avenue, I guess?
I would love to see a study or something that shows the negative impact of virtual reality, because what I'm thinking now is no one will ever think of virtual reality as a legitimate replacement for reality.
Yeah.
Like, there will always be that little voice in the back of your mind saying, well, this isn't real, in the sense that, you know, like the walls I'm seeing is just a bunch of zeros and ones.
Yeah.
It's not real. And I think that also has an effect. What happens afterwards when you take that VR headset down and you realize, here I'm sitting in my room and there's no one here? And like, essentially, like my fear is that we get to a place where no one leaves their house ever, because you can now just
Order your groceries online.
Yeah, and like a drone will come and bring it to you. But my fear is that we will become so connected in the virtual space that we become isolated in reality.
Well, maybe I'm opening up a conversation much bigger now. I don't know.
That's what we like
but
to
the
do.
question for me is then, we've got to define reality.
Yeah.
Because even what you're saying about ordering your food or your groceries online, virtual reality, you can end up saying, but I've ate today. I've dined at beautiful. Because again, you know, what we're talking about is we're talking about something that you put on that allows you into spaces where you imagining doing something that you're not doing. It's like entering your preferred dream world.
Yeah.
It's like, what do I dream about?
Yeah.
And but now I have control. Where when I go to bed, I don't necessarily have complete control about what I'm going to dream about and what this world is that I'm entering into. Virtual reality for me is just I control my dream world. I decide what table I'm sitting at. I'm deciding what, you know, and I've got a little bit more control over it. And what you were saying, John, what I was thinking about the whole thing of even Christ, and this is where my struggle with this is, his death and resurrection was obviously the birth of the church and the beginning of transformation, but the transformation, I believe, happens in a relationship. So what he did was restore relationship. He restored the relationship that was broken in the garden. So he restored relationship with God. He restored relationship between man and wife, or between human beings, because Adam ended up saying to Eve, no, it's your fault. And, you know, they were blaming, and there was a breaking. And you can see it clearly if you go to Cain and Abel. If you go to the rest of the guys, you can see that relationship was even broken. And Jesus restored that.
Yeah.
And Jesus also, for me, he also even restored our relationship with the earth, because there was also a break between Eve and the snake, or nature, and where God said the earth will just bring thorns and thistles after. So there was no thorns and thistles in the perfect creation. So but all of it is relationship. All of it is the restoring of relationship. And this is what I'm wondering about, this whole thing of the virtual reality. is not just the concept of church, but how it impacts relationship. Because at the end of the day, that's what Jesus restored. Church's mission is being in relationship with God, being in relationship with one another, and also getting those that don't have that relationship, then introducing them into the fact that they can have a relationship with God. That's the basic understanding for me of the message that the cross brought.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, virtual reality's impact on what Jesus tried to restore
Yeah.
was a relationship.
Yeah.
And it's like this thing is moving us away from actual relationship. Because the messiness of actual relationship, I mean, JP, we're still praying with you for a wife, if there's anybody out there. Now I can joke with him online. You know, I do it regularly in our meetings. But here's the thing. You can just at one stage say, I'm very comfortable in being on my own, but I'm going to buy myself a virtual reality wife. You know, I'm going to get my goggles and I have my meals at night and I'm going to eat my meal, very romantic. I can set up the sunset and I just have this virtual reality wife.
This artificial intelligence responding back to me
Yeah.
with the personality I've chosen.
Saying whatever I wanted to say.
Yeah.
They're saying, and you know, you're going to get tired of all the love conversations, and you might just have a setting where you can say, tonight I want an argument, and you just get into an argument and see how far you come with fighting with your wife. You know, it's
And if you walk that, you can just reset and start again.
yeah, you know. So again, the impact of relationship,
Yeah.
the impact of people. I mean, there's so many couples that cannot have children,
Yeah.
saying we want to experience having children.
Sure.
But we don't want to go and adopt another child. It's going to be a bit of a problem. We want our whole night's sleep. So,
Yeah.
so when we come home
And
from
And just to put this out there, I know there might be some people listening who are thinking like, but obviously what we're talking about isn't going to happen. People aren't that stupid.
we want you not to be that stupid. That's what we're talking now.
Please, don't be that stupid.
Yeah, I don't quite know how to say what I was about to say. I was going to say,
Well,
some people are, but all I want to say is this. I want to say that 10 or 15 years ago, things that people are doing today, we would have thought they would never do that. You know, people identifying as paraplegic is like, it's like people identifying as a baby when they're 35 years
yeah.
old.
Yes.
Yeah.
We would have never imagined that to be a possibility. So as much as these things sound a bit absurd now, there are people out there who have the psychological capacity to think this is totally okay and is good when it really isn't.
Well, I was going to say, well, you know, to those people who say we would never do this, is just look at the trends. This is sort of already happening with the online gaming community, of which I was a part of, you know, and I can
You're
see
not?
that.
Not anymore.
Not anymore, no.
Hey.
No.
Rehabilitated.
But like, so I played a game called Call of Duty online, and you can see, and I've heard a lot of people say this, that their online buddies who lives in like Siberia or Russia, or because they always speak Russian or something,
Yeah.
they claim that those people are better friends and know them better than the people they see on a daily basis.
Sure.
So, like, for those people who say this won't ever happen, if you look at the trend, what is happening, like, this is sort of like the steps are there, and we are on our way there, I would
Sure.
say. Like, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
It's definitely there. It's definitely there. And even outside of virtual reality, what you were saying just now, John, about somebody identifying, pardon me, from a, you know, I'm 40 years old, but I want to be a 5-year-old. And
Yeah.
I've also seen here and there, and that's the other thing, you don't always know what is perfectly true on the
Yeah.
internet.
Absolutely.
But I've also seen here and there where people would want to get married. There was one lady that tried to get married with the I think the what is a bridge in France where they put all the locks on.
No.
You know, there's some people that feel that they have fallen in love with the object, and it's not far-fetched. I mean, these days, and I don't know what your age restriction is on your. So to all the parents out there, I am a pastor, very responsible at Deo Victoria Church. You know. So, but we need to say this. I mean, the fact of having sex dolls is
Sure.
is a reality for many years now.
That's a
So.
good point.
So that's a fake relationship. It's just the difference between something that you put on here or something that you've got to take to a garage and just pump up again so that the doll gets its shape again. I mean, it's the reality is out there. You know that
sure.
people are building relationship with objects
Yeah.
That's
than
scary,
with
eh?
actual human beings.
Super scary. So I want to move this conversation along a little bit quickly, if you guys are okay with that.
Go for it.
I want to mention, I want to play a little bit of devil's advocate for a moment. Well, I say devil's advocate. Some people might be offended now. But earlier, one of you mentioned, I think it was you, Harry, about it's like a dream world. You can go into like your dream space kind of thing. And some people might argue that that's exactly the value of having church in virtual reality, and that at least we're giving people the opportunity to go to a church service in their dream world instead of, unfortunately, what a lot of people would end up doing, and that's going to a strip club or a casino or something else. I mean, people like to live their fantasies out in a private, anonymous space. And if we find ourselves giving them the opportunity to instead fill that time with church, maybe that in itself is the value of it. Maybe that's the space we need to fill. I don't know what you guys think about that, but it just popped into my mind.
Well, I would say let's take it back to the issue of live streaming, right? So in the I think that COVID has become a very convenient excuse for people, you know. But in the time of COVID, churches had to sort of adapt, you know, and live streaming was just a thing. Like that's the thing that worked, and everyone did this. But it comes back to that question: is this a legitimate replacement for church? Because I think Harry, you also said that VR or virtual reality gives you a sort of element of control that you don't have in the. So I thought about this. Like I can attend like a virtual church service, and I can enter a lobby, and I see, okay, there's Mr. X. I don't like Mr. X. So I exit the lobby, I enter a new lobby in the same church service without Mr. X. Right? And now all of a sudden, the element of growth isn't there. Because now I get to choose the perfect situation, which means that you won't see growth. There's no forgiveness. Like the chances of me forgiving Mr. X or whatever he did, or you know, whatever the case may be, falls away.
Yeah.
Because I can avoid people that I don't want. I'm sure that there are options for private lobbies. You sit alone or you sit with your friends, you have a church party online, but you don't grow as a person. You don't grow, which is also one of the core things of church, I think, and relationships is growth. And I think that if you give too much control to people, it's not beneficial to them.
Yeah.
I believe that, yeah.
The control isn't the thing for me necessarily. And I'm going to throw just another angle, or not the angle, but but I want to say it's one of those things. Okay, let me just say it. Is the God that we serve, and we're building His image, couldn't save mankind virtual reality way. He himself became messy in our world. He became
flesh.
He became flesh. And yeah, so that you understand what I say, messy in our world. For him, it was to be with a Judas in a room and wash his feet.
Sure.
To have a Pharisee take him out and tell him you're wrong and you're a sinner and you're bad. And I mean, just to think that God is so intrinsic into that thing of the growth and relationship, which I think if there's one being that could have said, guys, we're going to go if I can put it, if I can say it in a different way, a detached relationship kind of way. He could have just, when Jesus was baptized, he opened up the heavens. So he could have just opened up the heavens and said, guys, new rules. It's like the pool games that you have, that are we playing old rules or new rules? He could have just opened up the heavens and said, new rules, guys. Okay, now you will be forgiven. It's going to. It was all in His power. But the way He designed it and the way that He decided to engage with humanity is to say, I'll get into your space. I'll come into your home, Zacchaeus. I'll come to your daughter where she's dead, and I'll touch her. I'll cry with Mary and Martha about Lazarus. I'll engage in your world, and
sure.
So
I'm going to jump deep into this now, so put your seatbelts on. But the conversation's going in this direction anyway. So a lot of people would argue that that's where the people are going to be, and so we need to meet the people there, which has been one of the big promotional points for live streaming. And I just want our viewers to know that at the moment I'm sitting here with my senior pastor, Gerrie, and we live stream our church service, and I'm sort of in charge of making sure that live stream happens. So, but a lot of people would say, okay, we need to get to where the people are and meet them there. And I think one of the articles I read about virtual reality church, that was one of the things one of the churches said, was like, that's where the people are. There's thousands of people there, and we need to go to them. And in principle, I agree with that biblical teaching 100%. But with what you were saying a moment ago, how Jesus sat with Judas and washed his feet, and I realized that the call of the church is to be Christ-like. And then I'm asking myself the question, is it okay to even do that and apply that same theological concept of we need to go to the people? Is that being applied when we do online church and when we do VR church? Or is that us actually fulfilling that instruction at all? Or are we just using it as a cop-out and saying, well, we're going to where the people are, but we can't wash those people's feet? And in a way, what I want to say is, I understand that the people in VR need church. And for them, having a church available is good, which is what I said just now, the whole devil's advocate thing. But for a moment, let's focus on the church and let's ask ourselves the question in terms of the commission we've been given, is that where the church needs to be? So I'm just taking it from a different angle and saying, sure, those people need church, but is that what the church needs to be? Because can we wash their feet? And I'm just going to bluntly say it, that I don't think so. And why I opened my whole thesis by creating this thing of what we believe for VR church, we have to apply to online church. And it's specifically because of that. It's specifically because of that lack of human contact that's messy. And it's in that messiness. So many of the commandments in the New Testament are commandments to love our brothers, to love our neighbors. It's to embrace that messiness and work through it.
Yeah.
That's what the commandments are about.
Yeah.
And it's difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's super difficult to do that in a virtual space.
What you're saying, John, is so true. If Jesus said we must forgive 70 times 7 and every single time, the reason why he's saying it because it's needed.
Yeah.
You know, and if it's not needed anymore, you know, you can create your perfect world and, you know, because we're going to make mistakes. We're going to grow and we're going to. But this is where, okay, so we're live streaming, and you guys know that. And I've always got, my wife always says, I've got a million ideas in my head, but I never share it with anybody, you know. And so nobody knows why I'm going into a direction. And, you know, and so even with us sitting here, and John saying that we are, you know, he's helping us with live streaming.
Yeah.
I realized that there might be thoughts that I've thought about live streaming and why we do it.
Yeah.
You know, that I haven't even shared with you guys, but also let's just go there. So I said earlier, there's a difference between information and transformation.
Yeah.
And I believe you quoted the scripture from Romans 12. So what we do pick up from the Bible is that information can bring transformation. So it says, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. So that's what I said earlier. I've got ideas about, I think it will never replace the essence of the New Testament church. We will never be able to say virtual reality will replace actual messiness of relationships. But if it is out there, we've got to figure out, so what do we put it out there?
Yeah,
and it would be interesting to see what they do put out there in actual virtual reality church.
Yeah.
For instance, for me, if I go into actual virtual reality church, seeing a worship team up there trying to worship will not make sense to me.
Yeah.
But seeing a preacher or even maybe a worship leader, if that's the effect you want, you know, a guy with a guitar in his hand or something, that says something profound that can make me in 5 minutes when I take down that device. Think differently about my wife. Think differently about where I'm going for work. I think there's a space for that to meet them where they are.
I hear you. And I love what you're saying in the sense of I actually watched one or two video clips of the VR church thing, and the one that I specifically saw, they had the pastor up like on a big screen in the church. So it's like not actually the dude standing there, but it's just like they fake a screen and then put the pastor up on and he's preaching. And I love what you're saying about it can be transformative, that message can be transformative. I mean, here we are doing a podcast, and some people are literally just going to listen to this audio while they're working. And we hope that this episode is going to make a difference in people's lives and bring transformation. And so effectively, if we say VR church is completely bad, then we say this podcast is useless. In the exact
But we
same-
don't know.
Right, but we don't know. but I've got a suggestion that, and this isn't a church meeting, this is podcast conversation, so let's keep it there, you know. But perhaps the solution is that we need to stop calling it church, because maybe that's where we're crossing the line. Because that was going to be my last sort of angle for today's episode is there a place where VR church can cross the line? So, for instance, I saw evidence of one of these VR churches preparing to do virtual reality baptism. And like immediately I'm like, you're crossing a line. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. That's a line that's been crossed for me biblically. Where's the water? It's virtual, it's zeros and ones, man. Like, at least send the guy outside to go dive in the pool.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea.
So I think that's sort of the thing is maybe we've actually shifted that line a little bit too far just in saying this is online church. Because what you're suggesting is the information can transform lives and it's good that the information is there. And that checks out perfectly with the devil's advocate argument I made of it's great that people can choose church instead of a strip club, that they can now choose the information of church. And I also get that's the challenge, is if we take the term church away, then people might not choose it. So I see the struggle there. But maybe that's where the challenge comes in, is that we call it church. But according to what Jesus and the Bible intended church to be, that actually isn't church.
Yeah, I think I've got a question. I don't know if this sort of makes sense in my mind, but let's say you've got a mega church in America, because at the moment, VR church and, you know, the big live streaming churches and stuff, those are the big churches with lots of resources who can build this infrastructure that is needed for virtual reality and all those sorts of things. So you've got this big church in America that's sending that's created a VR church across the globe. Like you can
access
that's going to hurt local congregations, because what's going to happen in my mind is people from, like, say a small church in South Africa, for instance, like people are going to leave that church because we're calling this online church, we're calling it church. So I am attending church and I can justify when you know, someone like, I don't know, I'm a part of a church, and you can sign up to be a part of Mega Church X. But
Great church name.
But not even mega church. You know, there's some small churches that got the infrastructure to do actually an incredible online
campus.
You know, so But I hear what you're saying.
And that leads to local congregations hurting at the end of the day, because people are leaving these local congregations to join this church, and this church doesn't even know your name. Or the pastor doesn't even know your name.
I mean, I know somebody very, very personally who has specifically joined a church from very, very far away and no longer attends a local congregation here in Newcastle, South Africa.
Shrek episode.
Very, very far away.
Well, I think I understand it, and, you know, being the senior leader, I appreciate that view. I'm not hurting other small churches, you know. But I do think that it is an opportunity. If we go broader, you know, even with this, it is an opportunity for somebody in rural India where there is no one that connects with them on a spiritual level, or in China, whatever they allow, you know, but to have that space that they can call church in a way. But they can never call it completely, you know, and that's why I say I'm a very guy that goes very much to the whys, and I know you guys as well. That's why you do what you do now, you know. But is the actual essence of church, you know, that's what we've got to fulfill. And I think it's going to be difficult sometimes in some rural areas and so on. But if they can connect in some way with an online audience, but again, now we're actually, if we're thinking about live streaming a church service,
Yeah.
We're again defining church.
Yeah.
In any case, just in a church service.
Yeah, for sure.
You know,
Sure.
so even if we take the live stream away, we're again saying, well, the Sunday thing, that
Is
is
church.
church.
Yeah.
You know, but it's a cultural, and it's a word that goes around. So I get why people would use that, because you can very clearly, you're not going to say, I'm going to do virtual motivational. I'm going to do
Yeah.
virtual church, so everybody knows, okay, it's connected to some form of Bible,
Absolutely.
it's connected to some form of, so
Yeah.
I get why they use those terms.
Yeah.
But it cannot replace the New Testament church in terms of the relationship building,
Yeah.
but it can definitely help in terms of information. So the question is, why do we put it out there? Why I feel we put our live streams out there is, firstly, if a congregation member cannot be there on the Sunday and they want to be on the same page. So you get back home after a weekend of being away, and you just want to get inspired a little bit. So it's not, you're not doing church. You're not actually, engaging in all these relationships. But you want to be inspired and say, well, maybe God want to share something, or maybe my thinking needs to be challenged. Now you've got all these different options of many churches. And for me, the first thing is, I want to give you an option of our local church.
Keeping it at home.
And saying, oh, wow, that is what, they addressed, in your Newcastle over this week, with the challenges and the things that are happening in this week alone. And apparently I heard there was another attempt on one of the municipal workers to kill it, which they didn't do, but or just couldn't get to that point. But so that's our local reality. So for me to just be connected with a guy in America or a guy in Britain or a guy that doesn't understand my world, but we've got to accept that that can influence our world.
Yeah.
The international speaker can influence our world, or the guy from the other side of the world can influence. And it's the same with your podcast. I mean, it can influence a guy from Britain now, or from wherever, from Australia, from New Zealand, from any place in the world.
Yeah, it's complex. Like, I'm wondering, there was an entire age of the church where it is characterized by the church getting it wrong. For instance, the Crusades, the whole Roman Catholic church state thing that grabbed the church almost on a global scale. Now, I'm always one who affirms the fact that even though history focuses on the fact that that's what the church did, obviously there were church segments that weren't involved in that. But that's what characterized the church. Crusades and church states and all sorts of things. And we look back at that today and we're like, oof, you guys slipped up a little bit there, That's not what the church is supposed to be. And I'm wondering if in 50, 100, if we get that far, years' time, if the church then is going to look back and say the same thing about this entire internet revolution of church. In the sense of, I totally understand everything you're saying, but at the same time, I'm asking myself the question, if one of us never did it, then none of us wouldn't have had to do it, in a sense. So I know the first church who sat down and said, yes, let's use this live streaming stuff that's come into the world and get the message out there. It was revolutionary and it changed lives. And it's fantastic. But are we going to get to a point where it's more detrimental than good? And then we look back and we're like, yes, we actually shouldn't have overstepped that boundary. And the only reason why I'm suggesting this is because I have an alternative solution. I would have never said that if I didn't have this alternative solution. I'm wondering within myself, I know I'm involved in buying the equipment and building the infrastructure. And I just want to say on behalf of our church that our church has a great infrastructure for our region and for a small-sized church. I mean, we're a small, medium-sized church. I don't know where we actually classify, but we've got a great infrastructure. Our live streams are good. And we could possibly be the reason why somebody leaves their smaller church to join our live stream. So I want to say we know this. We're in that thing. It's not like we're separated from it, so we're pointing fingers at other people. But what I want to say is I know the cost implications behind it. And I know the implications of manpower and things like that go into it, expertise. And we're on a small scale compared to some of these massive churches in the world. And I know I've spoken to some of these guys and their infrastructures are worth millions of dollars. And to maintain it, their budgets are millions of dollars a year. And I'm wondering, that rural place in India you're speaking about, if they shouldn't have missionaries stationed in that rural place in India with those millions of dollars to establish churches. And I understand some of those places you can't establish a church, but shouldn't that be our primary focus and where that primary bulk of our finances are going? And hear me out, I'm spitballing it, like I'm just suggesting it. I'm not saying we should all stop live streaming tomorrow and just send missionaries. Here we are. And thankfully, live streaming was a possibility in 2020 and 2021. So I'm not condemning the practice. I'm just asking, what impact could have happened if all the churches that have spent millions of dollars on building these infrastructures had spent that money on equipping saints to plant churches in the unreached places of the world?
So the missional move, if I can maybe say something about that, because our heart is also very big mission.
For sure.
And but there's been through the generations, and I can't remember now exactly what the years, but I think about 150 years ago, and maybe even a bit longer, the first wave from the early church was physically go to those places. And not everybody can go. And till this day, there's a big wave of it. But in the last, I'd say, 100 years, what has transformed and is actually missions has become something of equipping a local individual to do the mission work.
Yeah.
For instance, we support missionaries in India.
Yeah.
Now, just I'm spitting out a few figures here from my head now, but to support somebody from South Africa because of the rand
Exchange
price
rate.
and the exchange rates, and also our lifestyle kind of thing, to support sending a couple, for instance, from South Africa to India and let them be situated there, having to learn the culture, having to be trained in the language, having to embrace the nation for it's going to take more than 5 years to actually do that.
Absolutely.
But also to support one couple like that, for the same amount, we can support, I'm just spitting it out there, but at least 10 pastors, at least.
Amazing.
10 local pastors, because they know the environment, they're used to their lifestyle, and we can support the church and them.
Yeah.
I'm not just saying
No,
just the pastors. Where so there's been a move of that, saying that missions is equipping the saints, the local saints.
Yeah.
So there's always people needed
To go and train those people.
to go and train them. But the movement of how we train them has changed.
Yeah.
So that's where the advantage is now.
Yeah.
some of our missionaries, and I don't know how far you go with naming names and things like that, but the guys that we have in Russia, they do Zoom training where they train 1 or 2 or 3 people in different of the Stan countries.
Yeah.
So it's completely Islamic countries, but they have access in training them, but they are part of the culture. The locals are part of the culture. They understand the thinking, and it's the same with us. I understand the Afrikaans guy playing rugby, having this dream about becoming a Springbok, and then being disappointed in the Springboks, and you don't want to be a Springbok anymore. And then, I understand something. I do. So it's much easier for me in my own environment, and I think there's been a change in the missional direction. So that's why a lot of guys are doing it in that way, just to
it makes a lot of
help
sense.
you. Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense, and
give a bit clarity.
And I think it's a good model. I mean, at the end of the day, in that way, when the local church flourishes, the global church truly flourishes. It's not just our westernized missionary who's flourishing. It's literally a local Indian congregation that's flourishing when we flourish. And that's a beautiful model.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if those super mega massive churches were spending millions of dollars a year supporting local Indian pastors, how many Indian pastors would be being supported right now? And I'm not saying they don't do that. I want to be clear. I don't know what their missions budgets are. I know what their live stream budgets are because that's my field. And I'm just like, it's a lot of money to get your face on a YouTube video. I mean, this setup cost us like 200 Rand. But anyway, JP, you've been wanting to say something for a while.
Like that model that Harry you spoke of, isn't that sort of what Paul did anyway? Is he went, his mission was, he established churches, and he rose up pastors in those churches.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of, he mentored Timothy, for instance, who was a young pastor. And he basically invested in him to equip other people to go out to spread the gospel and evangelize in that way. So I think I think that model is biblical as well.
That's cool.
And what I want to say is using live streams and VR church and all this technology and stuff as a tool to do that, I don't see a problem with that. But again, it comes back to, and this has been my question from the beginning, is we cannot, and this is my opinion, I guess, we cannot allow this to replace church. We can't allow this to become the new, this is church, guys. This is, the future is now, old man. We can't allow that.
Yeah.
So I don't know how far you go with mentioning names of big pastors and so on.
You're welcome to go for it. Yeah.
So I've heard, for instance, just a conversation, I can't remember, but it had to do with John Piper and actually Rick Warren, talking a little bit about that. I didn't hear the conversation. I heard the comments afterwards about the speaking together. Is that, because the question is, why do we want to be online? And I believe from their viewpoint, the only reason they're online is to mentor others. That's why they're on Twitter. That's why they're not building church online.
Yeah.
They're building a mentorship. They're building a platform of giving information and helping others to grow. It's not you will get missionaries that will go like Paul, what he did. But then we are living in an era where technology is allowing us to say, we don't have to send somebody to Home Affairs trying to figure out how to get a passport right now, and sending them on this. People can stumble upon it even, online, just seeing, here's a church service, and they can get information and maybe get up to the point where they get saved and engage. You guys know that in the last couple of weeks, we've started with the thing of allowing, and thanks, John, for putting that up, you know, but on our online to allow online visitors to complete a form for us.
Yeah.
The reason why I did that is because that takes you into now we're engaging. It's not just you're looking at our sermon and say, oh, this was lovely. But now we're engaging and seeing how can we help you. If you're in Morocco or if you're wherever you are, how can we help you? How can we engage with you? How can we, you know, pray for you, but also help you to be missional wherever you are? You know, and I guess my opinion about the whole thing is, and I can't remember who said it, but yeah, that's why I quote a lot of guys and so on. But somebody once said that maybe the last final sin is doing the right thing for the wrong reasons.
Sure.
And I think that's what it comes down to. Internet is there, virtual reality is there, but we've got to figure out why we're going to use it. And if we know why we're going to use it, if we know it's to maybe do a 5-minute motivational thing and help somebody to think about his marriage differently and give information that can lead to him engaging in conversation, to lead him to a church, lead him to be missional, then I think it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But if our motivation is wrong, that's when even doing the right thing can be wrong.
So I think we must bring this episode to a close. We just hit an hour. Well done, guys. But I think I want to be clear and say, because I know I've been the one who sort of introduced the most harsh, like, this is bad. But I want to be clear that I think it would be foolish of us to not use the internet. It would be absolutely foolish. So I'm not suggesting we don't do it. I think this conversation was just about where's the line between church and not church, and where is exactly what you're saying. What is the value? And let's be clear and honest about that, and try and make sure that we stick to that. And I think the onus, if that's the right word, is on the local congregation to ensure that they are being the church within whatever realm they choose to have influence. You know, when we send money to our missionaries, we need to ensure that we are available to be the church for those people. And the same thing applies when we put our service online. We need to make sure we're available to be the church for those people. So it's not even so much a question for me about who's watching. It's more about exactly us knowing and being available and being ready to be the church that God envisioned and that Christ envisioned for even those people, which means not just letting them watch a sermon and call it a day. And that's on us to make sure we're ready to do that and we're available to do that, I think. But I mean, we don't know.
Yeah, we.
Oh, yes. We really don't know. It's true. I think what you said earlier about 100 years from now, if we're maybe still around, you know, I know we won't, most probably. We'll be on our heavenly journey by then.
For sure.
But if Jesus doesn't come back, I think people will look back over this era and think, what in the world, you know? But I do think one thing is for sure in my heart that we've seen over these hundreds of years is that the church always stood through the ages.
Absolutely.
And the church embraced in every era what was in that era, so that the message can be spread.
It's true.
And for the next generation, it is important for us to embrace it in such a way, not to compromise on our message, not to compromise on the value of Jesus dying for relationship, for actual relationship, but to embrace whatever it is. And in 100 years' time, virtual reality will most probably be not there anymore. Because big kingdoms have fallen in the last couple of hundreds of years, where everybody said this will never come to an end. Maybe it will not last, but we've got to, from era to era, embrace what we have, but we've got to know why we do it. Why we do it.
I really love that. Thanks, Harry. That's awesome. And thanks, JB. I think this was a good episode. I think we're going to nip it there.
I've got one thing to do is remember, Jesus became human. He didn't become a computer program.
He didn't become a .exe. No, that's cool.
That's a powerful statement, I know you said it in a joke, but the Jesus becoming flesh is an incredible thing.
It's the basis of the gospel.
Thank you for having me today. And
awesome.
it was great to be with you guys. Thank you for my heart hug.
We only have 2, but I don't know mics.
So
we need to make another
but
one.
I had a love mug here. So John, JP, thanks for inviting me into your virtual reality space.
In closing, is there anything you would like to say to our viewers about going to go watch our church's live stream or?
Yes, please do. Deo Victoria Church. www. No, but just now our heart sees, and we're always trying to figure out, why are we doing what we're doing, and especially when it comes to that, keep on building relationships. I want to say that to everybody out there, maybe when it comes to church or anything else, we're living in such an individual era where people are trying to find their way in this life by trying to do it by themselves. And the internet is not helping, because we're trying to watch YouTube videos into figuring out how to build relationships.
I'm so guilty.
And but it's good. Again, it's good to get the information. It's going to be unwise not to watch it. But engage in relationships completely. And maybe just the last words from me that I really, really, really want to say. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. We're living in an era with so much information that the pressure is on, and everybody is feeling this pressure of saying we cannot make mistakes. Relationships is going to be messy, but build it. Rather build relationships that are messy, make mistakes, but allow yourself to actually feel reality.
Sure.
So
that's awesome. Everyone, thank you so much for listening to our episode today. It's been great to be here, and it's been great to have Gerrie on the show with us. We hope to have some more guests in the future. I think it went really, really well. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Remember to jump over to our social media networks and get involved there, get involved in the conversation. Check out our website. Hopefully our merch will be live there soon. We'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.
Thank you so much for watching that very fascinating episode about that very fascinating topic. We would like to remind you that we've got other fascinating episodes and other fascinating topics on our fascinating website.
Fascinating indeed, JP. We're also on the following social media networks: Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
Wow, and we would love it if you would go there right now and comment on any one of them, or all 3 of them if you please.
That would be great. You're amazing. Don't you ever forget that.